Hey everyone, this is Teo. In today's video, I'm going to review the Microsoft Surface Book 3 from the perspective of a visual content creator, someone who does digital illustration, graphic design, edits photos and 4K videos on a daily basis. So we're going to see whether or not this is the performance powerhouse that Microsoft claims it to be. This video is going to be a bit long because it's going to be very detailed. If you want to save time, you can actually check out the text review that I have already written, and any updates to this video will go to the text review. Alright, before I start, let me give a big shout out to Microsoft Singapore for providing me with this review unit. This is the 13.5-inch model with Intel i7 quad-core processors, 1.3 GHz that can boost up to 3.9, has 32 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage, comes with the NVIDIA Geforce GTX 1650 graphics card. So this model is somewhere in the middle. These are the various configuration options. So for the base model, which doesn't have the dedicated graphics card, it comes with Intel Iris Plus, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. That is US $1,600. For the high-end model, the 15-inch with NVIDIA Geforce GTX 1660 Ti Max-Q, that has 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage. That is US $3,400. And if you are a business customer, you can even configure it with the NVIDIA Quadro RTX 3000 Max-Q. The Surface Pen is not included and is sold separately for US $99. So this is a bit pricey compared to traditional laptops. For the same amount of money, you can probably get more RAM, storage, better graphics card with normal laptops. However, the main selling point here with the Surface Book 3 is you can detach the display and use it as a tablet. And before you can detach the display, you actually have to quit certain software that's using the graphics card that's located in the base here. So let me just detach anyway to quit the software. This is a beautiful touch screen display. The colors look great out of the box. I've already color calibrated this and measured 97% sRGB support and a maximum brightness of 300 nits. So it looks great. The bezels are not as thin compared to some of the newer laptops or tablets, but this is very functional because it allows you to actually use the tablet, hold it like this without accidentally touching the display. And it's quite thin. That's the power and volume buttons right at the top. You can see some vents there, that's for dissipating the heat. The processor is actually on the tablet, but there are no fans inside. There's a camera here that can be used for face unlock, which works almost flawlessly. Another camera is here, 3.5mm audio jack, it's here, a weird location because when you are editing videos or watching movies and you use your earphones, the cable is going to dangle from here. It's kind of weird. The overall design looks really good. Design is very clean and simple. There are no ports other than this holes here for attaching the tablet to the keyboard base. The lock is almost instant when you attach the tablet. However, before you can use the keys and the trackpad, you have to wait for that dialog box to pop up. Otherwise, the keys and the trackpad, they won't work. And this is how long it takes to detach the tablet. It's actually faster compared to waiting for the keys and the trackpad to work again. There. This is a laminated display, so there's no gap between the glass and the LCD beneath. When you are writing, it really looks like the line is appearing directly beneath the pen tip. This design has been around since 2015 when the first Surface Book was released. It's a dated design, but to me it still looks good. If you are into digital illustration, 13.5-inch is actually a good size to draw on. Let me compare this display size to A4 paper just to give you a sense of how big it really is. So this 13.5-inch display is just slightly smaller compared to A4 paper. And if you go with the 15-inch model, that display will be larger than A4 paper. Resolution of the display is 3000 by 2000, which is a good resolution in the sense that when seated 1 arm's length away from the display, I wasn't able to notice any pixelation. Toolbars, menus, they all look very sharp. Brightness is good enough, 300 nits. If you use the keyboard shortcuts to change the brightness, it will drop from 300 to 240. And the next one is 140, so the drop is quite significant. If you want finer controls with the brightness, you can adjust the brightness here in percentage or go into the settings to use auto brightness. The display is very glossy and reflective. Now the viewing angles are quite good in the sense that colors, they don't shift when you view from different angles. The keyboard is excellent. This is easily one of the best keyboards out there. Even better, I dare say, compared to the MacBook Pro. The keys have good travel, they are springy, and the overall feedback is just wonderful. The only downside to this keyboard is there is no control button on the right side. Instead, they have this option button. So if you're someone who uses a lot of keyboard shortcuts like I am, you won't be able to control O to open, control plus minus to zoom in and out, and all these keyboards that you use with your right hand, it's going to be almost impossible to press. The keyboard has backlight with 3 brightness settings. The trackpad is big enough, has good feedback, it's very responsive and accurate. Opening the laptop with one hand, it's kind of difficult, mostly because the back, this is not the usual soft bouncy rubber. This is kind of hard and it's slippery on table. So opening this laptop requires me to open it from the side, but don't worry, this is not going to slide around. It's heavy enough. Actually, it's heavier than I expected. It's 1.53 kg. The overall build quality is excellent. It's very solid and I really like the clean aesthetics. The hinge still looks cool even after all these years. And here we have 2 USB Type-A ports. And the SD card reader is incredibly convenient. And vents for the fans are hidden here. On this side, there's the proprietary port for the Surface charger and the Surface dock. This is USB Type-C. This is not Thunderbolt 3. There are people who complain about the lack of Thunderbolt 3. Well, if you are using devices that make use of Thunderbolt 3 bandwidth, I can understand where you're coming from. But if you are not using Thunderbolt 3 bandwidth and you have no intention of upgrading to Thunderbolt 3 devices in the future, then I don't understand why you're complaining about something that you're not going to use anyway. Because USB-C, it's still quite capable. You can use it to output video and audio. You can use it as a USB hub. You can use it for charging as well. Speaking of charging, in addition to charging with this big charger that's included, which by the way has one USB port for charging as well, you can also use USB-C for charging the Surface Book 3. If you want to use USB-C for charging, make sure your source provides enough power. Otherwise, it's either going to charge very slowly or not charge at all. Battery life is around 5 hours at maximum brightness when the tablet and keyboard are combined. Now this is when you are doing light computing tasks like working on Word documents, watching videos, or surfing the web. If you're doing processor-intensive tasks like editing and exporting videos, then you can expect battery life to be even shorter. When used in laptop mode like this, both batteries will be used, but the battery in the keyboard base will be used faster so as to conserve the battery life for the tablet, because the capacity for the battery inside the tablet is just 22 watt-hour, whereas in the keyboard base it's 63 watt-hour. Without the keyboard base, the battery life for the tablet, it's around 2 hours at maximum brightness or slightly less. But again, the battery life will depend a lot on the apps you are doing. So if you are just drawing, surfing the web, or taking notes, you can get around 2 hours. And if the brightness is lowered, you can get slightly longer battery life. The Surface Book 3 definitely has no problems with graphic design work. Even though it has a quad-core processor, it's still powerful and fast enough to run all the various graphic design software. So let me just launch Photoshop 2020 to let you see how fast it takes to launch. So there is an SSD inside, so it should take pretty quick to launch the app. Yes, it is. And let me open up this file, which is 900 megabytes. That was reasonably quick. This Photoshop file is 14,000 pixels by 7,000, so it's a high resolution file. Panning around is quite smooth, and zooming in and out is also very smooth and fluid. When tapping on the display, it's going to wobble slightly because the tablet portion is heavy. This laptop mode, it's top heavy, but it's not that big of an issue. I mean, even if you tap on other touchscreen laptops from other companies, the display is definitely going to wobble. So for large files like this, if you want to see instant edits, instant changes that happens on the display, it's not going to be that instant. So you can actually just tap on the slider and that will be more instant rather than sliding this left and right. Now this performance, it's actually not surprising. It's well within my expectations. So the performance is actually considered quite good. This is Adobe Illustrator, a vector software. It runs very smooth and fluid as well. The fonts are rendered very sharp. You can use the trackpad or you can use the pen to edit, which is nice. You have options. The fans are now turning. The noise level is minimal. I can hear it if I'm here for it. When it comes to using graphics software, I actually prefer to use an aspect ratio that is less wide. So this 3:2 aspect ratio, it's nice. It gives me more vertical space, allows me to see more of my work. When it comes to smaller displays, personally for me, I prefer an aspect ratio that is less wide. There are no issues with editing photos. In fact, the edits, they are more instantaneous compared to earlier on with Photoshop with that huge file. So I can drag the slider here to change the exposure and the edits appear almost instantly. And this display, it has good colors. 97% sRGB support, so it's definitely good enough for editing photos. I exported 100 raw files, where each file is around 24 megapixels. It took around 4 to 5 minutes. It's actually a range because if you export a lot of files and the processor gets hot and hotter, the export times will be longer. So if you are just exporting a small batch of files, then the export times will be pretty quick, about 4 minutes for 100 raw files. When it comes to editing 4K videos, it performed way better than I expected. So even though the Intel processor is supposed to be underpowered for the price that you are paying, in actual reality, when you are working with a 4K project, it's actually quite powerful. This was able to play 8 and 10-bit 4K videos at 60 frames per second without any drop frames. And when it comes to exporting, this was able to export in half the time of the actual project. So if the project is 5 minutes, then it will take about 2.5 minutes or more to export. If the project is longer, it's going to take more than half the time because the throttling will start. The base speed for this quad-core processor is 1.3 gigahertz. I'm not sure why they put 1.5 here. Anyway, when it comes to exporting short videos, it can boost up to 3 gigahertz and maintain that for a period of time before it drops down to what you are seeing here, 2 gigahertz. So when it comes to exporting long videos, maybe 5 minutes to 5 minutes and birth, then it will take more than half the time of that project. So for a 10-minute project, you can probably export it in under 7 minutes. And my videos, they don't have any special effects. It's just stitching the videos together. I don't use stabilization, LUTs, or anything. So this is the sort of performance you can expect with very basic 4K video editing. This is not a 4K display, so you won't be able to watch your videos in 4K. It's just 3000 by 2000, and this video is currently playing at 1440p. It still looks sharp and detailed enough for me. For the 15-inch Surface Book 3, it's also not a 4K display. It's 3240 by 2160. When you're playing 16 by 9 videos, you're going to get black bars at the top and bottom, but not like really thick bars. Here's an extreme close-up on the video. Can you spot any pixelation? Now I want to show you the drawing performance, but first I need to detach this, turn it around so that I can push it back down like this. By the way, there is no lock, so I need something to prop up the display. I'm using this. Alright, so now I have a nice angle to work on. Let me show you the slow diagonal line test first. So I'm going to draw a straight line very slowly to see if there is any wobble. I can see slight wobble, but it's not too bad. So you can definitely see some wobble. I don't use a ruler because I don't draw with rulers. There is no problem when drawing straight lines or horizontal lines, just that with diagonal lines, there is sometimes that slight wobble when you are drawing slowly. Let's do a quick sketch with Photoshop. So the jitter with the line, it's definitely an issue with certain apps, and with Photoshop the jitter is actually quite obvious. I'm going to complete this sketch very quickly and zoom in to show you guys the line quality later on. Initial activation force, it's alright, although I really wish that the Surface Pen, it could be even more sensitive. So when it comes to drawing thin lines, it's still easier to make the brush smaller rather than choosing a big brush and then relying on how sensitive the pen is, how sensitive the Surface Pen is to draw the thin lines, because it's challenging to draw thin lines with the Surface Pen. So earlier I was drawing with the brush smoothing at 0%. I have since increased it to 20%. So the lines now, they are a bit smoother. The jitter and the wobble, it's less obvious. Drawing thin lines is of course still possible. You just have to get used to the pressure sensitivity of the pen. By the way, you can adjust the pressure of the pen by using the Surface app. So you can drag this slider around to change the pressure sensitivity of the Surface Pen. Now some drawing apps will perform better compared to others. So this is just a very quick sketch that I drew to show you guys the line quality. So you can see here, when I drew this curve, there is some wobble here as well, and here. So if you're someone who draws a lot of line art, this is definitely going to affect your work. Let's see if I can get the lines to taper nicely. I can get the lines to start very nicely, but when it comes to tapering, you can see it's quite abrupt, or sometimes the taper is just not smooth at all. Pressure sensitivity works well. With smoothing at 20%, The lines, the curves, they look smooth, but the pressure transition, it's not as smooth as I want. So you can see it goes from thick to thin very quickly. The transition is not as gradual as I want. This transition here, it's quite nice, but here you can see it's not as smooth. Creating dots is easy, it's just tapping on the display. Overall performance with Photoshop is quite smooth and fluid, and also when using textured brushes, no problems at all. You guys may not notice, but there is actually tilt sensitivity and it works. This is MediaBank Paint Pro. I can see some wobble, but this is not as obvious compared to Photoshop. If you draw really slow, if you're someone who draws slow, then yes, the wobble is going to be more obvious. But as mentioned earlier, the wobble also depends a lot on the app that you are using. When drawing at moderate speed, the line quality is still alright. The tapers here, again, not as smooth. Pressure sensitivity works quite well here. Clip Studio Paint works fine. In fact, I think this is one of the better performing apps. Pressure sensitivity works really well. It's also very responsive. I can get thin lines very easily. You can see here the lines, they taper very beautifully. All the apps in this video, they work with touch interface, so you can zoom in and out, you can rotate, you can pan, of course, all the usual finger gestures you can use. Sketchable is an app that performs really well on the Surface Book 3. The line quality is also way better compared to Photoshop and MediaBank Paint Pro. Pressure sensitivity works very well. The drawing experience here, it's very predictable, very consistent. So that's great. Sketchable also supports tilt. So this is pressure and this is tilt. Pressure and tilt sensitivity doesn't work by default in Krita because there is this WinTab and Windows Ink thing going on. So to enable pressure and tilt, you have to select this Windows Ink option instead of WinTab and restart Krita. After which pressure should work, but there is the line wobble issue. So you can see here, this line here, it wobbles slightly. And now tilt will also work, but somehow the cursor doesn't follow the direction where the pen is pointing to. Other than that minor issue, tilt still works predictably. One nice thing about using the Surface Book 3 is, since this is a touch screen, some of the apps, they are designed to really take advantage of the touch interface. So for example, with this app called Concepts, you can see the buttons, they are very big, very easy to tap. With Photoshop, Clip Studio, you can see the menus, the buttons, the palettes, they are a bit smaller. But for Concepts, for Sketchable, for apps that are designed for the touch interface, they work great and they are very intuitive to use. With Concepts, I find that the pressure with the Surface Pen, it's not as sensitive or accurate compared to Concepts running on iPad or on Android. So here you see the lines, they are all of uniform thickness, even though I did press down a bit harder to get the pressure, but the pressure transition, as you can see, it's not that smooth. So that's the issue here. I'm not sure if it's an issue with the app or with the Surface Book 3 or with the Surface Pen. So here, this app, it's not working as well as it should be. This app also happens to support tilt sensitivity, but I have to tilt the pen at an angle where this part, the part that is holding the nib, is actually touching the glass. With Sketchable, I did not have to tilt this low to get tilt sensitivity. In case you are interested in the writing performance, the Surface Book 3 is excellent for taking notes and writing. It's able to capture my handwriting rather accurately. Palm rejection on the Surface Book is quite good, so I can draw with my finger, but when I put my palm on the display, there are no stray strokes, so palm rejection works almost flawlessly. Alright, to conclude, let me just go through the things I like and dislike. I like the design. I still like the design even though it's 5 years old. It still looks good. Build quality is excellent. The keyboard, the trackpad, excellent. I like the selection of ports to USB, microSD, USB-C. No Thunderbolt 3, but that's not a major loss for me. The display, the tablet, the colors, fantastic. 97% sRGB support, so this can definitely be used for photo and video editing. And speaking of video editing, the specifications for this particular unit that I have, this is definitely more than powerful enough to edit 4K videos. More specifically, 8 to 10-bit 60 FPS 4K video files, no issues with this. So any computer or laptop that can edit 4K videos without drop frames and the editing process is smooth, that's a powerful enough system for me to work with, and this is powerful enough for me to work with. Things I do not like, battery life could be better. So if you are running this in laptop mode like this, at maximum brightness, you get 6 hours of battery life. If the brightness is a bit lower, or if you use auto brightness, you can get more battery life, but 6, 7, 8 hours, I guess it's alright. But if you are using the tablet alone, the battery life is just 2 hours, which to me, I find it to be quite short. So it's best to have the tablet attached to the keyboard base most of the time. Another thing I don't like, of course, it's the drawing performance, which really depends on the app that you are using. So I have tested many apps. The best apps for drawing would be Clip Studio, Paint, and Sketchable. With the other apps, sometimes there is the line wobble when you're drawing lines, whether or not it's straight or diagonal. Usually with diagonal lines, there is more wobble. And sometimes pressure sensitivity, it's not as sensitive as I expect. So drawing performance really depends on the app that you use, but more specifically, I think the Surface Pen, it could be improved. The Surface Pen is said to support up to 4,000 levels of pressure sensitivity. However, if you choose a big brush and you want to draw with light pressure to get those thin lines, it's quite challenging with the Surface Pen. I mean, I have used a lot of pen displays before, like those from Wacom, XP Pen, Huion. When you choose like a huge brush, you can still draw thin lines very easily because those styluses, they are really very sensitive, and you can draw thin to thick lines and get those lines to be very smooth, and they taper really beautifully. But the performance with the Surface Pen is as you have seen in this video. So for artists and illustrators who rely a lot on line art, I'm not sure if this is good enough. The Surface Book 3 is pricey. If you need raw performance, then go for traditional laptops. You can get 6 cores or 8 cores of processors. But here, the main selling point is you can detach the tablet, you can create work directly on the tablet, and it's already on your computer. You don't have to get like a laptop and then a separate tablet and then when you create art on that tablet and have the file transferred to your computer, because those are two separate devices. Here you can just create work directly on tablet, and this happens also to be your computer. So whether this is worth your money will depend on the type of work that you do and your expectations. Alright, if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I hope this video is helpful. Thanks for watching. See you guys again. Bye.